Today we're going to look at the technical details behind Amazon Q and CodeCatalyst, and as you might know from the last video that Henry and I did on Amazon Q and CodeCatalyst, I was doing really bad at prompt engineering and I was very disappointed from Amazon Q and CodeCatalyst. So today I'm very excited to have Yilun on the show, who is hopefully going to bring us some details into what happened in my last try and how I can do better going forward. So Yilun, great to have you on.
Hi, great to be here.
Who are you?
So my name is Yilun. I'm a principal engineer in AWS, and I've worked on Q feature development in CodeCatalyst.
Cool. So you're the person behind Johannes assigns an issue to Q, and then something happens in CodeCatalyst?
Yeah, so Johannes would assign an issue to Q with hopefully a relatively specific issue title and description, and then some magic happens within the background. We occasionally wait for Johannes to give us new instructions on what to do, and then we try to generate a pull request based on whatever it was that he wanted to do.
Cool. And you helped to make that happen. So I think you can show us everything and explain us how it technically happens in the background, right? But maybe before we kind of rush into that details, what the hell is Q for people that don't know what that is? So can you sum that up?
Yeah. So Q is AWS's generative AI assistant. It appears in various forms, like in the AWS console, within the IDE, and within CodeCatalyst. Today we're talking about Q within CodeCatalyst, which is you can think of it as a virtual assistant that helps you work on low complexity coding tasks within CodeCatalyst when you create an issue.
Okay, so it's my GenAI companion in CodeCatalyst.
Yes.
Cool, yeah, and I think that directly gives us the chance to look at, what actually is it, how does it work? So if you're okay, let's get started with looking at how do I interact with Q and CodeCatalyst.
Okay, I can share a screen. So here I have an empty issue board within CodeCatalyst. This is a project that contains the AWS CDK library, which contains all the L2 constructs for all the AWS services. And what we're going to ask Q to do today is something very specific to one of the L2 constructs. So I'm going to create an issue, and that's the first starting point to interact with Q. And what I want it to do is for seeding code commit repos in the CDK, I want to add some validation to ensure that the file that is provided actually has a zip extension. So I need to add an issue title, and optionally I can put an issue description, and then I can assign it to Q. Once it's assigned to Q, Q's gonna wait and ask me some questions before getting started. And so
let's try that.
Yeah, so what Q asks is, before we begin, does it want me to, do I want it to stop at every step so that I can give it feedback? I can say yes. Are we modifying workflow files? We're not modifying workflow files today. And then this is the repository that we're going to operate on. So I'm just going to confirm.
And now what's going to happen in the background? So I assume now Q has everything it needs to get started, right?
Yep, that's right.
And what will now happen? Can you share some details?
Sure.
And show some details with us.
Yeah, so we outline kind of in this feed that Q is going to read the repository, try to understand and explore the repository, generate an approach to accomplish this task, and then write the code. I'm going to share a different tab where I can show you kind of more of the architecture.
Yeah, that would be great. So let's look at the technical details behind it.
So we try to keep Q's kind of orchestration relatively simple. It's because generative AI is a relatively new field, and as we discover new techniques, we want to be able to kind of adapt quickly to it. And so Q's journey along this task represents a simple state machine where, at start it doesn't know anything, and then it's going to explore the repository. And then after exploring the repository, it's going to come up with a plan of how to accomplish the task. And at this point, a user who's interacting with Q and the task is able to give Q feedback, and then Q will rewrite the plan. And once the user is happy with the plan, or if the user didn't ask Q to stop and wait for kind of feedback, then Q will proceed in writing the code, and then it will iterate on the code if there are failures. And so the first three states in this kind of workflow live within the issue lifecycle, and then the last state and the transitions here live within the pull request. And each time that there is a transition, what is happening is we're sending one or more prompts to Amazon Bedrock LLMs to essentially do that work.
Okay, cool. So let's dive a little bit deeper. So GenAI is still new for most of us, and interacting with Bedrock is also something that I think everyone is still practicing, right? So I think how impactful are the prompts that are being used here? Can you talk a little bit about that? How long did it take you to find the right prompts to make this work?
So it took us a while, right? Because LLMs are by nature probabilistic, and so some of the actions that they take are unpredictable. And we spent quite some time trying ourselves and also kind of looking at research to see, whether there's a way to bind or constrain the probabilistic nature of the LM. And so we find that a lot of the times asking the LM to do something a little bit more specific helps, right? Making sure that there's kind of examples that the LM can follow and just emulate what it was doing before also helps. Sometimes we ask the LM to say, are there any mistakes in your work? Try to correct it, and so that helps as well. And some of those techniques makes its way into Q and CodeCatalyst.
Cool. So a lot of research and also trying out went into this, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
How do you solve? So I'm running a meetup, a user group for AWS in Bergstraße area, right? And on Monday we had a talk specific on Bedrock, LLMs, ChatGPT, interacting with it. How do you actually talk with it, and what is kind of prompt engineering? And one of the takeaways for me was that there's only a limited number of information that I can send to the LLM, and there is only a limited number of information that I will get back from the LLM as well. So I can imagine in the repository that you just showed, it's not possible to just take the whole source code and put it in the prompt, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so there's a couple of things that we're doing. For small repositories, we are going to fit as much of the repository into the LM context as possible. And when that is not possible, there's a common technique that is used in industry called RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, where we try to identify the relevant information to send to the LM, and then the LM takes its actions or makes its decisions based on that.
Okay, cool. So that means that there is a different behavior in how Q operates in the background depending on the size of the source repository.
Yeah, that's right.
Correct?
Yeah, and so what, like, the actual difference that happens is for feature development in CodeCatalyst using Q, for smaller repositories, Q is going to explore the entire repository, and it's going to get a better understanding of what's going on in the repository. And as a result, sometimes you don't have to be as specific about a particular prompt. For larger repositories, essentially what you're kind of targeting is making sure that whatever issue or issue description that you give will show the right outcomes in retrieval augmented generation first, and then the LLM would go, take the work from there and move forward.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool. So I don't know. I hope that you have seen the video with Henry. What happened there? Did we put in the wrong prompt? Was it just badly described on what we wanted to do?
I think it was probably not badly described, and so there are things that could have been maybe a little bit more specific. But I think in that example specifically, we were also not kind of doing it. So what actually happens is there is an intersection between what the LM generates and how we insert the response of the LM into the pull request, and essentially the LM generated something that should have been placed in different places, or we essentially put or kind of our logic to process the LM's output was wrong. And so in the case last time, it looked like it deleted a bunch of data, right? And what actually happened was the LM generated a response on a file that we thought contained binary data, and it actually contained a character that was non-UTF. So we fed the LLM something that the LLM didn't understand, and then as a result, it tried its best to kind of do the work, but then it didn't know of anything after the kind of character that was non-UTF, and then that caused a problem.
Okay. So after all, it was not that bad prompt that we used, right? So, but we hit a special case kind of that then forced the CodeCatalyst implementation to not present us something that was helpful. And then maybe I think it's great to have you on because we can clear that up a little bit as well. So if I would now want to re-implement what you did, of course, I would not have your prompts, but would I use step function to replicate this behavior, or how is this technically solved on your side?
I think you can use step functions. Within CodeCatalyst, we have our own essentially event bridge for changes along the issue lifecycle and the pull request lifecycle that you see here. And then within that event bus, right, we will call a number of Lambda functions, and then those Lambda functions will call Bedrock. If you want to build something similar to what we're doing on kind of lifecycle changes within your own resources, I think that I think that step functions would be a valid way to model the state machine.
Cool. Yeah. Then let's see, what did Q do while we were looking at the diagram?
Okay.
Did he or she? How do you say internally? Is it he or she?
I think we just refer to Q as Q, and yeah.
When I first learned about Q, I wanted to call that agent Werner, right? But no one liked that. It looks like, because we went with Q, but that was my idea, right? Let's call him Werner and ask Werner to contribute to my source code. Okay, so what did he do? She, what did Q do?
So it looks like Q generated the background. I guess as we were talking, Q was waiting for us. And so
Okay.
it generated the background, it generated the approach. This approach looks like it's not modifying the right files. And so, and that was because it was because we did not identify the right files on retrieval augmented generation, unfortunately.
So can we give him a hint now and ask him to regenerate?
Yeah, we can try to do that. So we can say reevaluate the plan based on the code. Yeah, and then we'll kind of need to wait a bit for a new plan to show up.
So from a license perspective, I think today Q comes with the standard tier comes with, I think, 15 issues worked on with Q. If I now ask him to reevaluate the plan based on something, does this count as a second issue, or is this still the same?
It's still the same issue. So each issue has a number of reevaluations that go with it, and also a number of code corrections that go with the pull request once the pull request is generated. And we are also thinking of changing or increasing the limits on each of those so that customers can iterate more with Q.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and in the case where Q is not able to generate a code review, then you'll get that quota back.
Okay, that makes sense. And then the last video we had the issue that we got a pull request from Q, and we, I think by accident, triggered a regeneration. So triggered another revision of Q without actually adding him prompt or something that he or she should change. So we burned that one option of regenerating a pull request. Is this something that is technically not possible to reiterate more than once, or is this currently a more licensing issue?
I think it's kind of more of like a quota kind of enforcement issue. We're still trying to find the best UX. So what happened is Q tries to, so a code review generates a new action within the workflow. And what happens is Q will look at the output of that workflow and then decide whether it wants to fix any issues that are associated with it. And so that happens while you are evaluating the pull request and making comments. And so we know that that can be a confusing experience. So we've now changed it so it doesn't do that right away. And so that gives ample opportunity for you to review the issue.
Okay, got it. So that means I now have the possibility before it actually kind of triggers that revision to take a decision. Do I want Q to do that now? Right. So okay, cool. So we got a new approach. Is this different from the first one?
I think it is. It definitely is now trying to modify the code commit files instead of the non-code commit files from last time. So I'm just gonna ask it to proceed, and then we can wait for the code to be generated.
Cool. Do I get the possibility so right now to ask you to give me a summary of the source repository already? Which is not this functionality, but I think there's in this example it would be worth, right? The CDK code is pretty big, and I don't have a clue. Asking Q to summarize it for me would be maybe helpful. Is this something that we already have?
So for larger repositories, so for smaller repositories, I would just say that the background will be an adequate summary of the of the entire repo. For larger repositories, what we're essentially summarizing is the files that are kind of obtained by using RAG on the issue that was assigned to Q. I can show you what a summary of a smaller repository would look like, and you can just take a look at it from.
Yeah, that would be good. And are we somehow showing which of the two approaches is being used, or not exposing that today?
You mean the? Oh, you mean
how do
you know
I
whether you
assess?
have a big repository?
Yeah, exactly.
Repository?
Yeah, what did I get? Did I get the RAG version, or did I get the small version? That's kind of the question.
So you can tell from the background, right?
Okay.
The background when you're getting the smaller or when you're working on a smaller repository will say this code base implements blah 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 blah. And then so this is an example, right? So this is a different feature development instance where we operated on a smaller repository, and then you can see that this repository comes from the CodeCatalyst blueprint catalog, and we summarize the entire repository here, and then we use that to generate the approach. But in the other instance, I apologize for kind of switching back and forth. In the other
instance, gonna be edit madness for me, Yilun.
Sorry. In the other background, we say here's a summary of what the code files are doing, rather than here's what's in the code base. And so we'll outline exactly the files that it was looking at to.
Okay, so that means I can kind of understand the used method from the generated background.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the best UX right now, and we're definitely going to try to make it more clear in the future. And
actually, I think it shouldn't be important, right? It shouldn't matter to me which option is used ideally.
Yeah, definitely. Like ideally, like retrieval augmented generation is as good as having the LM interpret everything by itself, right? And so, yeah, this is a limitation technically that we have today, but hopefully will not be a problem in the future.
Cool. So where are we with the implementation? Do we have a pull request already or not yet?
I don't think we have a pull request yet.
But I can see that it should be still working.
Yeah, it's still working. When the pull request is generated, it will have like a green check mark around the pull request.
Okay, good. Did you ever try to ask Q to create a project for you as well? So in terms of like, so if you set up a project in CodeCatalyst, you can decide to go with start from scratch, right? So if we go with start from scratch and start with an empty source code repository, my first issue should be, can you create a CDK app for me that has an API gateway and a Lambda function? This is something that you tried. Would this work?
It could work. I think that you would have to start off with something relatively simple or specific, because if you don't have anything within the repository, there's nothing for Q to kind of go on to either learn or emulate. And that means that you're purely relying on Q's kind of reasoning logic to create that repository from scratch. We are there will be things that we will do in the future that will make that experience of starting from a blank slate better. But it's possible. I just don't have as much confidence in the quality of the response compared with if you're making a small change to an existing repository.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I was just trying to find out, right, whether you ever tried that, because that sounds like an interesting thing to do as well. So where's my screen share? Manage, change linked here. Where's that? I wanted to, while we're waiting, let me just quickly share my screen for a second and compare tiers. This is the tab I want to share. I hope that you can see my screen now.
Yep.
So here we see 15 PRs per space per month, right? Why is the limitation on the space? Because of billing, I guess, really from a quota perspective, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we think that within the standard tier, there's going to be kind of like a small group of people collaborating within a space, right? So kind of a low handful of members within a team. And so within an enterprise tier, that would be higher, but within the standard tier, it is capped at the space level.
Yeah, okay. And you let me know when you're done, right? I'm just gonna try to see while we're waiting to just try this prompt and see what happens, right? We can use the time wisely. So what I'm doing here is now an empty project, and I'm going to ask you to create a new CDK v2 project that creates a lambda function that is attached and event bus and deployed. Does it use the description or only the title?
It uses both the title and the description.
Okay, so that means and deploys out the SDK application using workflow. And then I'm very polite, so I do please use TypeScript as a programming language. And let's see, and I'm gonna assign this to Q. And of course this has high priority because we are recording this. So let's see what happens. Okay. And you let me know when your approach is generated, right?
Yeah, so now the code has been generated.
Okay, then I'm gonna let Q work on my issue, and I'm just gonna stop sharing so you can go back and share your screen.
Sure. Well, for your issue, Q is currently waiting on you to provide whether it wants you want it to wait or not. So
I will do that in the background.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so for this issue, Q has already generated the code, right, based on our updated instructions. And okay, if we look at the code, you can see that here there are some changes to the test file. And it will test, valid zip files and invalid, I guess, tar.gzs as its invalid case. But then it looks like it tried to bring in the implementation logic within this test instead of identifying the right file. And so this is kind of unfortunate. I do have an instance where we used the same prompt and it generated a better response. And I can show you.
I think this is, yeah, let's look at that. Before we do that, right, I think this is one of the main problems that I personally have with GenAI. You cannot really rely on what's going to get out of it. So sometimes to get a good response and sometimes to get a bad response, right? And that's one of the things that I don't really like.
Yeah. So generative AI is probabilistic in nature. And like I said earlier, we're trying our best to kind of limit the kind of range of different and unexpected responses that comes out of it. And so hopefully we succeed in our journey. This is a different instance where it looks like we do modify the code TS within the code commit L2 constructs. And in the from zip file function, we do add this validation that shows that we'll throw an error if the path doesn't end with zip. and then we'll add a test as well.
Cool. Yeah, that looks pretty good.
Yep.
Cool. Then let me share the result of my piece. I think it's not completed yet, but it's close to it.
Okay.
I just need to now find the right tab. The approach generated is amazing, right?
Mhm.
So it found out that it has only it has only a README. You cannot do anything with a README, but essentially it gives me all of the details of what I would personally do, right? I would create a new repository. I would use CDK init. I would create a Lambda function. I would create a YAML file. I think this one might be wrong, right? It needs to go somewhere else.
Yeah, it needs to go
And then I would add those actions, right? And now I could try and ask him to place the workflow somewhere else, right? And then let's see what happens. Please place the workflow in.
I think you need to specify in the reply. So so there's a proceed and reply button.
There. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, nice.
In the step number 3, the workflow needs to be saved. The .CodeCatalyst list workflows directory. And then let's see. Okay, and while we are waiting for this one to return, I think this was really great information and insights into how Q works in the background, right? And how we actually do that. What I would be interested in to see is, or to hear from you is, where are we going next with Amazon Q in CodeCatalyst? Can you talk a little bit about the vision and about what we can expect in the next few months?
Yeah. So when we started working on Q and CodeCatalyst, the idea was to have a AI companion that will help you along all steps within the software development lifecycle, right? And Q feature development, what we're talking about here, helps you in turning kind of like a simple issue into code, right? And so what you can expect in the future is that there will be Q will show up in more parts of the software development lifecycle. So we haven't talked too much about CI/CD with Q yet, or project management with Q yet. I can't promise any timelines, but you can expect that those are the areas that we're thinking about adding Q to.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense, right? And I think what my wish would be here that, and I've been saying that before, also I know that I understand the idea of having Q as a marketing thing. Like, I would really love to give a name to the person working with me in my team, right? So I would really want to give him a nickname and then say, I want to assign this to Werner or to Jeff, right, to work on. That would be pretty fun, I guess. And it should become, for me, really more like, this is the person that I talk to, right? So give me the possibility to interact with Q wherever I want at the end, and then treat it like a team member that is going to help me out if I'm not able to move ahead, right? That's what I would be wishing for, right? And as you can see in the background, Q has now a regenerated approach, and we have the workflow in the correct space. And now I'm gonna press proceed, and I'm gonna look at this later and see if this actually worked out as expected.
Okay, awesome. Just on your earlier point, like personification was definitely something that we were talking about earlier. Like we felt like one of the things that we kind of decided when we finally decided on Q was that if we started allowing folks to personify their assistants, then they're like, you will quickly want to personify multiple assistants, and then it would become a little bit confusing about how they would interact with each other. And so just like to simplify that experience, we're saying, okay, like we'll have one queue and then you interact with queue, and then like the expectations about personification doesn't kind of spread as a result.
Yeah, that makes sense, but I understand that feedback. Still, I would love it. And then
I get it.
make it help. Train him to train Q to understand what I do as a builder. So if I kind of click 5 times and I need 5 clicks to get somewhere, right? Q should next time show me a hint. This is where you could click if you want to, right? The direct link, these kind of things, like make him understand that Johannes likes TypeScript. He doesn't like Python, right? So he's gonna help me to convert Python to write Python if I'm really bad at it, right? And these kind of things, and making this really more like a pair programming partner, I think, is what I'm trying to ask for. But not only in pair programming, but also in my day-to-day work in interacting with CodeCatalyst.
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of kind of CodeCatalyst's vision is that, we are kind of with the developer through each part of the software development journey, right? So, of course, I think that in the future, we should be able to kind of capture kind of different habits or kind of best practices that developers do, and have Q be able to kind of remind the developer or remind their peers, for example, of historical kind of best practices or how things were done, or what they should pay attention to, etc.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool, Yilun. I don't have millions of listeners on my channel, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of people might be interested to follow up with you and ask questions. How can they find you or reach you? Are you on X or are you on LinkedIn, or what's the best way to contact you?
I think finding me on LinkedIn is probably the best way, and so I think it's just my full name, right? Yilun Cui.
I'm gonna just link that in the show notes then, if possible. And I think, yeah, would be great if anyone has feedback or ideas, right? You can also channel them through me if you don't want to take Yilun from making Q better, right? But if you have something very specific, Yilun is definitely the best person to answer questions on Q, right? And we're going to end the session with looking at the pull request that Q just generated for my try, right? So let's have a look. And we'll see if we can end this with a very happy Johannes, or with a Johannes that is still trying to understand Q. And let's have a look. Cool. So we got a workflow. The workflow does something. It doesn't do what I want to do, but I think it's close. The workflow, on the other hand, the other part of the generation, we have a lambda function. We even got a test. Yay, this guy does test-driven development, which is more than I do. But I think he did not add the event bridge bus. Well, he did. He did in CDK over here in the construct, which is pretty cool. So I would say, based on the prompt that I gave him, Q did a fantastic job, right? The only thing we need to improve is the workflow, because that one actually will not work. But I think, as you just mentioned, right, we need to teach Q that. And even if those models seem to be very smart, there is not that many CodeCatalyst workflows to train on yet, right? So I hope that this is also going to change over time.
Yep.
Yilun, thank you so much. We aimed for 30 minutes and we did 40. That usually happens when talking to me. I hope that you still enjoyed the time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for spending it with me. And looking forward to get you back on if there's major improvements or major things that you want to share with the world.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for kind of diving deep into Q. It's definitely something that we're super interested in making better.
Thanks.